Hello class. This week we're going to learn about correlation analysis. There's three different types of a correlation analysis I especially want you to focus on. One is Pearson, the other one is Bearsman, and the third one is partial correlations. So what is correlations? Correlations means that there are relationship between two variables, so A and B. The correlation can be positive or negative, and it can be one-way direction, which means A affect B or B affect A, or correlated to each other, mutual direction. Of course, sometimes the relationship between A and B are not necessarily affect unless you consider the third variable. So we call that a control variable. And the relationship between the two, we call that partial effect. When we talk about the general concept of a socioeconomic status, SES, normally refers to the education, income, prestigious, and wealth. Whether or not these four indicators are correlated to each other and how that related to each other is another type of example that you can do the analysis. So how can we tell whether or not the variable A and B are correlated to each other? It's based on the Cohen standard, and the standard will be calculated by the R value, and then based on the 95% of a confidence interval. The 95% of a confidence interval would determine based on the p-value. The p refers to the probability. The p-value has to be lower than 0.05. So that means we have 95% of a confidence that the relationship between A and B is not come from random. Okay, so 95% of a confidence interval is pretty typical, very commonly used in social sciences, such as the sociology field, psychology field, education, etc. Only few cases, like in psychology experimental study, when the sample size is very small, sometimes they will accept 90% of a confidence interval. When you start assignment 2, make sure that you complete the 3 lessons in module 3 first before you start the assignment 2. When you work on the assignment 2, go to the link and you will see that I attach a video clip, also the assignment 2 guideline, a data sets, and a codebook. You need to download the GSS data and codebook. To start assignment 2, you log into the statistical software, and then you select upload a data file here, because the data that I provided in Blackboard is in Excel format. So you will select the same format and then you upload the data. When the project's generated, they will pop out a level of a measurement first. Totally, there are 18 variables in this data, and I want you to study the codebook and see what type of measurement is it. There are only 3 different types of a measurement. One is nominal, one is ordinal, one is scale. The scale means either interval or ratio. So when you select, when you clicked each of the arrow within the variable name, you can see the scale, the nominal, and ordinal. Nominal variable is separated by name. So, sex is one example, or racial groups is another example, or marital status, whether you married, single, widow, divorced, etc. And those are nominal variable. What is ordinal variable? Ordinal variable is having the category ranked in order. However, the distance between each of the 2 categories are not necessarily the same. If the category extremely favor neutral, opposed, extremely opposed, then that is ordinal because it does show the different level of attitude, but you cannot tell specifically how far between the extremely favor to favor and how far is neutral to oppose, right? So that will be ordinal variable. If this kind of a distance between each of the two categories you can measure and the distance is the same, then that's interval, or we call that scale variable. Okay, so for example, like an income level, but the income level, you will have to make sure that each of the category, their distance are the same. So for example, if you have a category 1,000 to 2,000, 2,000 to 3,000, 3,000 to 4,000, and then jump 4,000 to 6,000, and jump 6,000 to 10,000, then that's not the interval because the distance between each of the two categories are not the same. Then that will be ordinal. After this project's created, then the same way you will have to share with me. Okay, so once you create your project, you can change the name. So then you will have to rename it. So click rename, and the same way to name it as assignment 2, comma, your last name, and then share with me. This is what the codebook look like. When you pull out the codebook file, you will see, on the left-hand side in bold, that's the variable name. And you will see all these names in your data as well. On the right-hand side, this column is survey questions. And other than the survey question itself, also there are information that is the answer, or what I call the category of answer that you can select. So the level of measurement will be based on what kind of a category you have on the codebook for each of the questions. So for example, for respondent's age, because that value is reflect the actual age, so you will see your information, the value, in the age category will be from like a 22, 23, or 45, or 72. Basically, that reflect their actual age, and the distance between each of the value are 1 year old, right? So the age will be a continuous variable, will be the scale variable. If you take a look at homosex, okay, what about sexual relations between two adults of the same sex? Do you think is always wrong, or what is your attitude about homosexuality? And the category is always wrong, almost always wrong, wrong only sometimes, not wrong at all. So you don't know how much different between always wrong to almost always wrong, and how much different, the distance between almost always wrong to wrong only sometimes or not wrong at all. So in this case, the homosex is ordinal variable. Income level, that's the other example I mentioned earlier. It looks like a scale variable, right? It looks like they have very clear number, and then range in distance, it seems very similar between each of the two categories. But when you look into it, they're not the same. First of all, the first category is under 1,000. The second one is 1,000 to 2,999. And then when you look at, like a category 17, is already 35,000 to 3,999. And if you calculate the distance between each category, the range are not the same. In this case, income level is not an interval or scale variable. Income level is the ordinal variable. So I want you to define the level of measurement based on the code book for each of the variables. In the assignment 2 guideline, I give you specific example, what you should do. So after you identify level of measurement for all variables, then the next step is selecting variable. You're going to do 3 different correlation analysis. And then for each of the correlation analysis, you can actually put as many variable as you want into the analysis. For example, for Pearson's correlations, you can put 10 variables all together and let it run the correlation of 10 by 10 and see how these 10 variables correlated to each other. But you don't have to do that because on your assignment 2, I only want you to demonstrate 2 variables for Pearson's, 2 variables for Spearman, and 3 variables for partial correlation. Because a partial correlation means that the variation or the correlation between the 2 variables is conditioned by a third one. So in that case, you need 3 variables to run the analysis for partial correlation. When you select the variable, you definitely need to study the codebook because you need to know what each of the variable name means. Without reading the questionnaire, you don't know what exactly the POLVIEWs mean, right? That means political view, but how they ask. So a research question will come from here. On the assignment 2, I give you a couple examples to initiate your research question. That helps you to decide what kind of variable you want to run for correlation analysis. So for example, if you're interested to know will the years of education affect the income level, how much people make, then the 2 variables you will need for answering this question will be education, EDUC, and income 06. And you will use these 2 variables to run the analysis. Or is the frequency of attending religious services or activities relates to people's attitude on homosexuality? The variable you will use is attend and homosex. The third example is will people's political view relates to their judgments on blacks? Then the 2 variables you will use is political views and INTBLKS. Basically, a simple research question you will have to do in order for you to identify which 2 variables that you will select for that analysis. After you decide these key 7 variables, then you can start run the correlation analysis. To run the correlation analysis is very simple and straightforward. Just follow, the instruction that I provided in the videos. Like the assignment 1, the software will automatically generate the analysis template for you, and you can work on your analysis, start from there. Finally, when you've done all 3 correlation analysis and generate the analysis report, next, I want you to develop your data analysis plan. You can go to the data analysis plan. When you click that, you can run the correlation, okay? You will run these 3 correlation individually so that it will generate 3 template report. Pearson correlation, when you click that, it will generate a template report, and then you need to download this report, fill in the variable that you selected, incorporate all of the correlation analysis into this plan. So in other words, you will have 2 reports. One is on correlation analysis that shows you what is the R value, what is the P value, and then how will that interpret, and based on the 95% confidence interval, and the other part will be your analysis plan. So what is this analysis plan for? Basically, analysis plan is to tell you that when you do a correlation analysis, it's not just a table or just a number of value, not just those R correlation coefficients, not just that, but also what does that mean and can that help us to answer the research question we raised. So the example I just used, I want to know if the educational level will affect how much money they make, people make in the US in 2006. So based on the GSS data, my research question in here, I will put down whether or not is statistically significant relationship between income level and the level of education. You should form two hypotheses for every research questions. So based on the example I have here, the null hypothesis is there's no relationship between the two. In other words, whether you make more money or less money is nothing to do with your education. So the education and income has no relationship. That's a null hypothesis. So all of the null hypothesis means A and B has no effect at all. The research hypothesis is what we call the alternative hypothesis, or H1. H1 is the key purpose that research questions want to get. So H1 always reflect to whatever you want to get, and we want to test it and to see whether or not it is supported. And that's the H1. In this case, that there is a correlation between education and income level. And the purpose for us is to find out whether or not the Pearson's R value support our hypothesis that we can reject the null. So if we can reject the null, then we will support that, yes, there is a relationship between education and income. How will the H1 be supported? So if your analysis report shows that based on the confidence interval and the R value located at the range that will support the significance, then that means your H1 is supported. We can reject the null. Your research question is significant. Read through your analysis report and then apply that to the research questions you want to find out. Select the variable from the data sets and run the analysis for practice. Dig into the data, you'll find a lot of things, that you might not knowing. For example, the relationship between education and income could vary by different racial group. When you see there is only small relationship or very low or weak relationship between education and income, it could due to other reason. That's what we call the control or partial effect. If you add another variable into it, say racial group, maybe it's more significant in one group, but not in the other. So that's what partial effect means. By controlling this third variable, it will change the relationship between A and B. You can test out different variable and to see which one is statistically significant and report the one is significant.